Hi there, it's Tom Stern on behalf of Indie Structure Productions, and I'm here to bring you a tutorial on how to stain guitars. As it just happens to be, here's two that I prepared earlier. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to go about staining a guitar in just a solid single color, and then using two different colors together, blending those and trying to go for somewhat of a cooler, well, not necessarily a cooler effect, but going for an effect and masking everything off so that you don't get it seeping into grain in other woods. All of that is to come, so why don't we just get started? Alright, so first things first, we're going to mix up some stain to keep this consistent. I'm going to go for a nice orange. So 1, 2, 3 drops of yellow. We'll see where we get with that. Alrighty, so what I've done now, it's water-based stain, and I've mixed it up to, hopefully, the color I want. So I'm going to go for a nice orange here. The first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that everything is dust-free. Don't worry about these guys, that's going to be a separate thing. So, I've mixed up some yellow and some red, and then put a little bit of water just to dilute that color, hopefully a bit, so it's not too brown. Now, first things first, what you want to do, fold up your rag into a tool, and then move from the middle toward the edges, so you don't get any drip. Like so. And the reason why I'm doing this cross grain instead of with the grain is because if I were to do it with the grain, I've noticed that it sinks into the grain in a different manner. In a manner that I do not particularly like. This gives, going across like so, gives me a little bit more control, and I feel that it actually goes on a little bit more solid, or it looks a little bit more consistent doing it in this manner. So every time I apply, I'm applying half over the previous layer. So now you can see that there's a clear line. And I'm going to start so that half of it hits that line. And the other half goes over. It's just a fairly simple process. Just as long as you remember to go toward the edge and be careful that you don't get any drips. Now, if you're starting to notice that there's some blotchiness, like there and there, for example, we'll address that issue in a minute. Because there is a way to fix that. This is kind of why I like using water-based stains, because they're easy. They're very easy. It blends into itself. So I don't need to worry about it being too blotchy, for example. Now, I feel that this color is a little bit too dark than what I'm intending, but we'll see once it dries a little bit. But yeah, I want a little bit more vibrance, so I might do the next layer with a little bit more yellow in it. Oh, that's quite a lot. Oh, I need to fix that before I start dripping. There we go. That was a little bit too watery right there, so it almost started dripping. The reason why I want to avoid drippage is because it will show. Alright, now, with all these areas that are not uniform, just going over again, just kind of smoothing out the color, as it were. In this case, though, that is some of the resin that I haven't managed to sand away. I like to do things in 3 passes, very much the same way that I would apply any finish, where I do the front, then I do the edges, and then I do the back. Just gives me a good idea of where I'm going. Another good way of doing this is if you do the front and the back and then do the sides last, you might be able to fix up any spills that you get from the top and the back if you happen to get drips and stuff like that. Of course, the goal here is to avoid that, but you know, sometimes accidents happen. And it's your job to learn from those accidents so you don't repeat it. Guitar building is a lot about how you address problems and fix issues, or how you can fix mistakes that you make. You're not going to continue making those mistakes because you learn from them every single time. Just one of those things. You're bound to make mistakes while building guitars. It's just a part of the thing. If you haven't made a single mistake and you've built a bunch of guitars, and good for you, but somehow I highly doubt that a lot of those people exist. Or then I'm just imperfect. I don't know. There goes my light, but I will soldier on. The basic principle was already established anyways, so this is just more a matter of repeating the process over and over. And once you start noticing that the color starts to fade, move on to the next layer. Or you start noticing that your rag is starting to dry up. The more consistent you're able to be, the better. So just going nuts with the stain and throwing it this way and that will grant you an uneven result. As you can see, that there's some places where the overlap hasn't blended into itself. That's easily fixed with just going over with stain again, or when you do your next layer of stain, you can go with the grain, and that'll fix the same issue. At least I found that to work very well. The guitar neck is a lot easier to stain because you can just go straight along the neck. Don't need to worry about things like this. I know now I'm going with the grain, but that part just felt a little bit easier. Because when you do the round over, of course you're going with the round over. Wait. Consistency above all things. And if you do like that, then you go somewhere else, and be sure to address that issue very quickly so you can get it properly blended into itself. Now, end grain will suck up a lot, so the color might change a bit, but if you're careful with it and you keep on blending, then you'll be able to achieve the same color in no time. That's, once again, the beauty of having water-based stains, that it blends in with itself. Okay, now to get rid of some of that discrepancies, some of the discrepancies here, I'm just going over again. So while the stain is still wet, I'm applying more stain just to blend everything together. This shouldn't change the color that much because you're still basically working with the same layer of stain. This is just blending everything together nicely. Now, we're gonna let that dry. That's just dust. Just looking over everything. Might as well. A couple of spots here along the binding that the stain didn't take, so I'm just fixing that up. Another way of blending things is just to apply water, but you should do that rather carefully so that you don't end up diluting the layer of stain you're working on. Most of it's a lot of common sense. You see that something's uneven? Even it out. How do you even it out? Even it out with more stain. Alright, let's let that be. Okay, one of the key things is to really let the surface dry properly before putting on the next coat. This can range depending on what sort of climate your guitar is in. This can range from 30 minutes to a good few hours. I'm gonna play it safe and I'm gonna let it dry for, I don't know, 4 hours. 4 hours sounds good for me. Don't necessarily need it to be for that long of a period of time. Even a couple of hours will do just fine. But I really want to make sure, especially because I added stain into some parts, I'm going to make sure that everything's completely and utterly dry before continuing forwards. The only reason why I'm doing that is I am going to do some sanding before putting on the next layer. And if I don't let the stain dry properly, when I sand it, it's gonna go a bit mucky and mushy, to use some professional terminology right there. Basically, it won't sand evenly if I don't let it dry properly. If it's completely and utterly dry and I sand it, it'll sand just fine and we can move on. If I don't do that, then it'll basically ruin everything and I'll have to start from scratch. So, let's let that dry.